Never forget when the U and Jimmy Johnson invented swagger.
You are Locked On Canes, your daily podcast on the Miami Hurricanes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Tuesday. Happy Truth Teller Tuesday. I'm Alex Donno, your host, University of Miami alumnus, longtime South Florida sports radio vet, and contributor to allhurricanes.com. Thank you so much to the everydayers for making Locked On Canes your first listen today. We are part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. We bring up multiple friends today. As you guys can see, Bruce Warner, the truth teller, is here. And Bruce, we have a very special guest that you brought with us today.
Sure. Well, he's a friend of mine from way back when, and we both look pretty damn good for our age. But and I've known him a long time. So Dave Hyde from the Sun Sentinel, who was a fabulous writer, not too great on computers, but he's a great writer. And he wrote this book, Swagger, about Jimmy Johnson. It's behind him over there. You could see it. There you go. That's a good thing.
And by the way, 4.6 average is pretty darn good because you're always going to get some haters, right? To be that near 5.0 perfect is pretty darn good, Dave.
Yeah, we'll take 4.6. I didn't know that. Interesting.
Yeah, well, he's on top of all this stuff. So anyway, so Dave wrote this book, and now we're coming off 7-5. We're recruiting in the portal, and guys are leaving, and it's kind of a mess. And it makes you think back to the good old days. This was the good old days because I was there. I know Dave was around. So Dave, talk about this, and I'd like to ask you just right off the bat before we, so Alex has some questions. What did you know going into this book about JJ? What did you learn from him, or what did you think you were going to find that you didn't, or you did find out that you just didn't know about Jimmy Johnson?
Yeah, so the book started, I actually went down to Jimmy and Islamorada to do a column on him going into the Hall of Fame. And I thought I'd had the idea of doing a book on him, or, from my side. And I pitched it to him at the end of the interview, and he looked up in the air for about 3 seconds and he said, "Okay, let's do it." And I said, whoa, don't you want to think about it for a while? But he got into it. And what did I learn from him? Well, a lot of stuff, it expounded on what you knew, which was, here's a guy who took a machete and created his own path in coaching. He had his ideas and how he was going to follow those ideas. The positive mindset, and some of the ways he went about them building up players. But I didn't know stories of him going on a blackjack and winning that way and getting mad at other coaches or friends who had a bad attitude at the blackjack table. And so that small thing, but to carry it over into football, that's sort of how he coached too. That he got to UM and he said he knew he was going to succeed. And why? Because I have the plan. And he got to Dallas and he said it wasn't a question of if he succeeded, but when.
Right.
Is it next year? Is it 2 years? I know I'll succeed. So, but then on the personal side, there were things I didn't know. And there's chapters in here. First of all, the Jerry Jones chapter set aside that, because that was just fertile ground that he hadn't really talked about or gone through. But on the personal side, his son Chad's struggles with alcohol, and what that did to the family, what it did to Jimmy, how they came out of it, and to become a much stronger family, and his relationship now with them. So, beyond that, the personal cost of coaching is something we never really think about. And it really hit home with Jimmy that for all his success, he hated being that guy. He hated being the guy he had to be.
Right.
But win as a coach, what he felt, the dictator, the driving guy, the guy when they have success, it makes his job harder because he doesn't want people to live off success. So he's got to keep pushing them. So he came to hate that guy, and that's one of the things that led him to leave coaching. So
he also said he got angrier and angrier and angrier every year. He got angrier. Yeah.
It's interesting because now, Bruce and Alex, you guys knew Jimmy, the coach, and as I did, and I've got to know him in retirement a little more as a person. Then in the book, I really got to know him, and he's like a teddy bear now. I mean, he's like,
yeah, non-confrontational. Yeah, that's exactly.
He still has that the ego, and he still knows what he's done and all that, but he's a teddy bear now.
Yep. Well, and Dave, going back to to his roots and his legacy at the University of Miami, the book is called Swagger, and that word gets associated so much with the history of Miami, and it goes back to that Jimmy Johnson era. How did he navigate that? Where he, you talk about his kind of dictator side, dictator side or whatever, but he really allowed these players to let their personalities shine through. And how did he sort of allow that swagger personality to develop at Miami?
Well, I think this was the real revolutionary change, the big change to sports in America, really. When Jimmy comes to Miami, remember, this is after the Bud Wilkinson era, the 60s, the Vince Lombardi and the pro, and it's especially college football. Forget Vince Lombardi, but the college football is a small pastoral town in Lincoln, Nebraska, or State College, Pennsylvania. That's where college football is known. And for the first time, there's a real urban centric, city, and brought the black athlete to the university. And Jimmy, it took him a while. It took him a little bit. In fact, Steve Walsh, talking to him, he said Jimmy figured out how to talk to and deal with and get the best out of, and that was by allowing the players to be themselves, as long as they played within his framework of what he wanted to do. You work hard, you don't make dumb penalties, you help your teammate, the team comes first. All that, as long as they worked in his framework, he allowed them to be themselves. And he not only allowed them, Jimmy got mad when people say, well, he has no control over his players. No, he did have control. He let them, he encouraged them to do this, not just let them. He encouraged them. He wanted them to be the best who they were on the field, because that would lead them to being the best player they could be.
And also, Dave, they practiced so damn hard. I mean, I was there. Yeah. They practiced hard. So when he got out on the field, he wanted them to express themselves, and they expressed it the way they did with the 6-shooters and the chops and this stuff and all that, and bowing and all that stuff. That's he loved it. And then when they started out the Oklahoma game, when Winston Moss and Alonzo were about and the late Jerome Brown, they were just mouthing off. He loved that stuff because he said, I got into their heads, they haven't even kicked off yet. So that was the beauty of Jimmy Johnson. And he also said, I'll handle the BS that we get from above. You guys just do your thing, right?
And that's really, swagger wasn't a word that was invented at that time. It came later, but it defined really what the University of Miami was in that era. And if you didn't live it, it's hard to recreate who they were in America. Sports Illustrated ran the poll. They were the most hated team in the country in all sports. And Detroit Pistons bad boys were second, and the Dallas Cowboys were third. Maybe I'm flipping Dallas and but the point being, Jimmy's teams he allowed them to act in a way that was abnormal in American sports at the time.
Right. And there were little bits of here and there of problems, criminal problems, but not as much as everybody makes it out to be criminals and thugs. That's just not true.
Catholics versus convicts, all those.
Yeah, that's not true. Yeah. Look at the Gators. How many arrests than they had when Urban Meyer was there? Wow. But you know what? So let me ask you this. So then he goes to Dallas and he wins 2, but he really won 3 because Switzer stepped in, whatever he stepped in. And he brought in a lot of Miami guys. The attitude didn't change at all. That's why he was successful there too. That's where you said he knew it. He did know it.
You know, he took a staff, you know, and that was really Jimmy created this staff going back to Oklahoma State with Wanstead and Butch Davis, and you can see his tree.
Mm-hmm.
But he would have a line when they were looking to draft a player in Dallas. He'd say, "Is he a Miami guy?"
Right.
And what he meant was, is he going to work? Is he full of confidence and ego that I love to coach? Because he wanted to coach guys in his, you know, who were like him. Like a lot of coaches do, and because he could he could associate with them and bring out their best, and so he'd have a line: "Is he a Miami guy?" And the coaches would know, you know, that was short version of all that. All he had they said yes or no, and then that meant okay.
Who was the guy that you wrote about? I forgot. He was getting thrown out of schools, but Jimmy asked him, "Is he smart? Football smart?" Was it Leon Lett? Who was the guy that was? I forgot who it was, but there was a part of the book talked about it. He said, "Listen, this is the kind of guy, I don't give a damn what anybody else wants. This is what I want."
Yeah,
right?
yeah. And when I pitched the book to Jimmy, I said, you know, you have all these league GMs and football people and basketball people, personnel people coming down, coaches to talk to you, and what the main thing they want to talk to them about, how do you evaluate talent? Because as much as everything else, how you evaluated talent, pick talent, was what made him, you know, and intelligence was the number one thing that he looked at, you know, and obviously the given is the athletic, okay, but the intelligence was number one, and so when he was looking to trade for Charles Haley, to your anecdote, he had all his coaches call anybody they knew in San Francisco and ask the number one, is he intelligent? Because I can work with him if he is, and if he's not, we got no shot.
Right. He didn't have any problems with guys that just did their own thing, or unless they were like in jail or something like that. But he didn't have any problem with some of these guys that just, they were their own individuals. Yeah, they crossed lines and things like that. But, you know, to this day, he's a legend. He's a legacy. He's incredible. You know, and he's a damn shame that Marino wasn't in his prime when he got to Miami. He had said that too.
Yeah,
it's true.
That was, you know, but it was a blast to do, as you can imagine. I went to Isla Mirada, I don't know, 10 times. And
you didn't ask me to go with you. I could have gone with you.
Went out on his boat a couple times, you know, went to Tampa and watched him give a speech. And so it was a blast to do. And those are the kind of projects you like. You never know when you jump something like that and you get embedded with somebody in a way, and are you going to like him at the end or not? But we had a good time doing it.
Good.
Yeah. So I'm curious, going back to the beginning of Jimmy's time at Miami, you know, he takes over for Howard Schnellenberger, who left, you know, big boots to fill at Miami. Obviously, Jimmy, I'm sure, looked at Miami having just won a national championship, being pretty loaded with talent, and knowing Jimmy, he probably could really see those rich, fertile recruiting grounds in a way a lot of other coaches probably didn't realize at the time. Was that at that point, Dave, in '84, was that considered a home run slam dunk hire on both sides? Like, it was coming to Miami, was that Jimmy's top choice? Was Jimmy Miami's top choice at that time?
Before Dave answers that, I can tell you from a fan's perspective, who the hell is this guy from Oklahoma State and Arkansas? Right, Dave?
Yeah.
Who's at Oklahoma State,
right.
and you know, he nobody really knew who he was, and here he comes in, and remember, he's replacing Schnellenberg, very popular coach, won the national title, and there were a couple assistants, Tom Olivadotti being one, really were dying for the job and angry they didn't get it, and then Jimmy, because the timing of it, Jimmy was hired in June, and all these assistants were under contract still.
Right.
And he was told, you have to take any assistant who wants to stay. Well, most of them wanted to stay. He could only bring one coach, Butch Davis, with him at the time, and which was a disaster. You know, I mean, I talked earlier about how important the assistant, his crew, as he called them, were to Jimmy. Well, he steps in, and all of a sudden he has these guys on the staff who think he's a country bumpkin from Oklahoma, and are upset they either didn't get the job or their friend didn't get the job. And it was a bad first year.
Wow.
Not to mention the defense that Oliver played and the defense that he wanted to play. It's two different things. That's why they lost a lot of those games. They choked. But he was upset about that.
The story, Oliver Dottie, of course, he left. He kept dropping his keys on the table Jimmy's first meeting. He said, I can't coach with you. And he left. But Bill Trout was the defensive coordinator. The famous story, Doug Flutie's famous miracle in Miami, or however you want to phrase that, the pass to Gerald Phelan to win the game.
The Hail Flutie or something.
The Hail Flutie, that's what they call it.
Before that play, Jimmy's calling up to the press box to Bill Trout to say prevent, and he can't get him because he's already left the press box and he's coming down.
Oh man!
He thought I talked to Bill Trout, thought they won, but that sort of sums up the miscommunication between on that staff.
And our buddy Alex Tolbert Bain and Darryl Fillington were the two guys that got burned on that.
That's right.
They had a backpedal, and they should have been back by the goal line, just like we lost this year to Georgia Tech. They screwed up. I
came to Miami the summer after that game, and I went out to Darryl Fillington. I was signed by the Herald. I worked for the Miami Herald at the time. Go out and talk to them, the defensive backs, about that play because it's still resonating. And I went up to Darryl Fillington and asked him, and he said, "What?" And he goes, "What play?" I don't remember that.
Oh man.
We had Colbert on the other day, but I don't really talk to him about that. I tried to
we stayed away from that. And something I'm curious about, Dave, with Jimmy, did he have like any notable career regrets? Because obviously, he had a ton of success, Miami, Dallas, and obviously the Dolphins thing didn't go. He built a lot of talent down here. Did he regret going to the Dolphins? I'm guessing he didn't regret leaving the Hurricanes because of all the success he had in Dallas. Is there anything he'd like to have back?
Well, I mean, like any coach, the big losses were the Fiesta Bowl.
Yeah, that bothers him.
Bothers to this day. That was his worst loss. And yet at the same time, he said that's when I learned, it was the final stepping stone to who I became, because it taught me a lot about, how to keep winning and how, no matter what anybody says, okay, I'm going to pile it on or whatever. So, I mean, that was the final brick in his foundation as a coach, I guess.
Right. And he wishes there was replay on that Notre Dame because that was horrible.
Terrible.
That was bad. Yeah, you could just see it. It's like he's looking like, well, there's no replay, and they got it wrong.
The regret that he really has, and this is why gave the book an added dimension was how much time he spent with coaching and the teams and all that, and he went weeks and weeks without seeing his family, his sons. His sons grew up without. They just stunning. Think of how many football games he saw as a coach. Coaching himself or attending a recruit or whatever. He never saw his sons play high school.
Wow.
And it's just stunning to me that but that sums up, he went all in as a coach.
I love that. And just curious, Dave, Miami just wrapped up a 7-5 season under Mario Cristobal. Your thoughts on the current direction of the program?
Boy, it's kind of if you were given a grade, it would be undecided, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
I feel like it's still murky as what's going on. You can see progress. Look at the offensive line this year compared to the last 20 years.
Right.
Very good offensive line. And yet how they lost the Georgia Tech game is something that's going to stick with Mario. Okay. And the ups and downs, when they beat Texas A&M in the fashion they did, I thought, okay, they're onto something. And, it's not going to be a straight line up, obviously, but they're going to have a good year. And I'm a little mystified. I'm not unclear as to where they are. Have they made steps forward? Yeah, I guess when I look at the offensive line, a few other areas, but are they progressively what I expected from when he came in here? No. So, and the whole Tyler Van Dyke thing, look, it's no surprise to anybody that he's going in the transfer portal, that he's leaving. It's probably the best thing for both sides. And that whole situation's mystifying to me. From 2 years with Brett Lashley, he was so good. Texas A&M this year, he was so good, and I thought, okay, now he got a coordinator he can work with, and a system that will bring out the best in them. And then whether it was injuries or what is it, the quarterback? Is it the system? Is it the coach? Someone explain it to me.
It is weird though, Dave, that they had those 4 wins, and then they go to the conference against Georgia Tech, and that offense that we saw just the other day against Boston College disappeared. We should have blown Georgia Tech out, but we didn't. And then not only was it not taking the knee, they got the ball back and they scored. We had one timeout. We should have called a timeout before the last play, so none of what happened would have happened. But the safeties are 6 guys by the goal line. Let them catch the ball underneath. The only thing that could have happened bad is what happened. So, and then the North Carolina game is like a week or two late. No, the next week.
Yeah, the next week.
We're winning 17-14 at the half, and all of a sudden they come out in the second half with a no huddle, and it's like our defensive coordinator says, I've never seen that before, so we'll have to correct it during the week, and boom, they got killed. The coaching to me didn't help these kids in certain instances.
Yeah, and then you go the Boston College game again, Texas A&M, where wow, this is who they are. This is who they can be on their good days. And
yet they almost beat Florida State with a true freshman.
Yeah.
Up there, no less.
And they almost beat a good Louisville team. I know Louisville. They soiled themselves against Kentucky the following week, but that's a darn good team. And Miami was toe for toe with them at home too.
And our defense played poorly for the first time all year. They were really bad.
Right.
They had a collision where these 2 guys collided, and the guy kept on going for the game-winning touchdown. The whole year was so screwed up. It's hard to even pick moments, but there's a lot of moments really good and a lot of bad moments.
Right.
And Mario, now he's losing players. And Alex and I have been doing this now for like 9 months, Dave. They need a defensive tackle. They didn't get one in the recruiting, and they didn't get one in the portal yet.
Yeah.
They need a quarterback. They haven't gotten one yet. And they need a DB. They brought like 10 DBs in, and none of them are that good. So I know he's built the offensive line. He's done some great things, but he's missing pieces that he absolutely has to look where we are. If Ja'Cory Brown goes into the portal, Dave, you might start in the bowl game.
Well, that's the question: is Ja'Cory Brown going to be back or not right now? And yeah, you got to walk on starting the bowl game if he does. So.
Well, I know I've told Alex. I know that he told him before the season started. I want out of here. I'm going to transfer out. I don't want to play. And that was obvious. He didn't play. And now if he doesn't play in the bowl game, he's leaving.
He is at the latest on that. He is expected to play in the bowl game. He could hit the portal the day after. That doesn't guarantee he stays long term, but Brown is expected to play in the bowl game as well.
That's a risk, because if he plays poorly, I don't know what happens to his value.
Yeah. But if he plays well, it's a good audition, whether it's to stay here or go somewhere else.
So does Jimmy? He considers himself Miami, though, not Dallas, doesn't he?
The only team he says was special. Every place else was just a job, except Miami.
Wow.
Right. And he comes back. He talks to the team, once a year or so when asked. And but that's his team.
Well, he got honored at the Clemson game. Him and Dennis, because Dennis and I were together upstairs in the former players suite, and Chuck Foreman. But he was there that day. He's a legend here. Everybody loves him. And unfortunately, for any other coach following, including Butch and Dennis, this is the standard that he set. People want to see that again, not necessarily Dennis's teams or Butch's teams, but they want to see that again. The word swaggers, it's never going to happen. You can't do those things anymore.
Yeah, I think you'd take Butch's team, wouldn't you?
I would take Butch's.
Oh, yeah.
I'd 5 first-round picks for what? or 4 straight years.
38 people drafted from the 2000
Yeah.
team.
In fact,
Crazy.
if I was to say what's the model for Mario, I wouldn't say Jimmy, even though he played for Jimmy and Dennis. I would say Butch,
Right.
who hits it out of the park recruiting, and that carries him on game day where you're like,
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
But he came from they had the probation. He came from dead zero.
Yeah.
At least Mario. Now, I think what hurts Mario more than anything is the NIL, because his greatness of recruiting is reduced because of people can offer money for a kid that he's been locked in with for 8 or 9 or a year or 2 or 3. You know, and that they could just here's more money. Goodbye.
Yeah, and the question becomes, where's the money? Where's the sugar daddies going? Are they staying, or what's going on there?
Yeah, I know.
Okay, I got to keep that Life Wallet stock pumping up. But we appreciate the time from Dave Hyde. Awesome job. And guys, check out the book, Swagger. If you're a Miami fan, if you're a Jimmy Johnson fan, probably most people watching and listening to this are both. You need to read Swagger. Dave, of course, co-wrote the book with Jimmy. Mr. Hyde, appreciate you so much, my friend. Thank you for spending some time, and have a great rest of your week.
All right, Alex, Bruce, good seeing you guys. Thanks
You
for having
too, Dave. I'll stay in touch.
Okay.
Thanks for coming on the show, man. I appreciate it. I told you he's a great guest.
Of course, he's a great guest. I've done. He didn't want to hear any more of your nonsense, though, Bruce.
Yeah.
We will talk to everybody again next time on another episode of Locked On Canes, part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.